When we think of advanced civilizations, we think of Rome, aqueducts, the Colosseum, a massive empire that conquered the known world. But here's a question historians have been afraid to ask. What if there was another civilization developing at the same time that was just as advanced or more advanced in ways Rome could never match? A civilization in the Philippines, trading with China, building complex political systems, creating advanced navigation technology, all while Rome was still figuring out how to build permanent structures. Today, on Echoes of the Empires, we're doing something nobody else is doing. A direct comparison. Ancient Rome versus ancient Philippines. And the results might shock you. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. This video is going to change how you think about ancient history. Let's go. The setup: two worlds, one time period. Let's set the stage. Rome in the 1400s was in decline. The Roman Empire had already fallen 1,000 years earlier. What we call ancient Rome peaked around 100 to 200 AD, then slowly collapsed over centuries. By the 1400s, Rome was a shadow of its former self, a fragmented collection of city-states. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, four major maritime kingdoms were at their height: Tondo, Cebu, Butuan, and Manila. These weren't ancient civilizations clinging to the past. They were contemporary powers actively expanding their influence. So here's the fair comparison. We're not comparing Rome at its peak to Philippines at its peak. We're comparing what both civilizations looked like at approximately the same time period, the 1400s to 1500s. Why? Because that's when Europeans first encountered the Philippines and documented what they saw. And what they documented is shocking. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Philippines, they found advanced kingdoms. When they looked back at their own history, they realized they were encountering something Europe had lost centuries ago. This comparison matters because it challenges the narrative that Europe was always ahead, that Western civilization was always superior. That's a lie, and the evidence proves it. Let's break it down. Government and political structure. Round 1. Political systems. Rome in the 1400s. Completely fragmented. The unified empire was gone. What remained was chaos. Competing city-states, feudal kingdoms, corruption. There was no central government holding things together. No unified system. Just competing powers fighting for dominance. The Philippines, sophisticated political federations. Each kingdom had a defined structure. The Lakan or Datu ruled with a council of nobles. Below them, a system of barangays, mini city-states with their own leaders. It was decentralized by design, but it worked. Here's what's fascinating. The Philippine system was actually more democratic than Rome's fragmented mess. Common people could petition their barangay chief. Disputes were settled through community councils. Power was distributed, not hoarded by a few elites. Spanish conquistadors noted this. One wrote, "Their system of governance is more orderly than we expected." They were shocked at how organized it was. By the 1400s, Rome was basically failed states competing with each other. Political instability, constant conflict, corruption at every level. Trade and economics. Round 2. Trade networks and economic power. Rome in the 1400s was economically stagnant. It had lost control of the Mediterranean trade routes centuries ago. Europe's economy was fragmented. Venice and Genoa controlled some trade, but the grand Roman trade networks were gone. replaced by feudal economies and localized commerce. The Philippines, absolutely thriving economically. Let me paint a picture. Tondo controlled trade routes worth millions in gold. Cebu's merchants operated across Southeast Asia, trading with Maluku, Sumatra, Borneo. Butuan had established trade relationships with China, India, the Arab world. The wealth flowing through Philippine kingdoms was staggering. Archaeological evidence shows gold, pearls, fine ceramics, spices. Chinese merchants had permanent colonies in Philippine ports. Japanese traders regularly sailed there. Arab merchants knew the routes by heart. When Spanish arrived, they confiscated treasures worth fortunes. Why? Because the Philippines was rich, genuinely wealthy. The kingdoms controlled trade routes that connected Asia to the world. Rome had lost that centuries ago. By the 1400s, Rome wasn't a trade powerhouse. It was struggling economically, while the Philippines was a global economic hub. Maritime technology and navigation. Round 3, naval power and maritime technology. This is where it gets really interesting. Rome in the 1400s had no navy, no naval power. Europe was just starting to figure out how to build ocean-going ships. Portuguese explorers were experimenting with new designs. Europeans were terrified of the open ocean. The Philippines, master sailors. Their maritime technology was generations ahead of Europe. Let me explain. Philippine kingdoms had been sailing across the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, and Southeast Asian waters for centuries. They understood monsoon winds. They had sophisticated navigation techniques using the stars. They built ships, called balangay and balanghay, that could handle long ocean voyages. Archaeological evidence from Butuan shows these ships had advanced hull designs, sophisticated carpentry, and navigation instruments. These weren't primitive boats. These were ocean-going vessels, comparable to the ships that would later be used for European exploration. Think about that. When Europeans were just beginning to figure out ocean navigation, Filipinos had already been doing it for centuries. They already knew the trade routes. They already understood how to sail safely across vast distances. Spanish chronicles actually document being impressed by Filipino ships and sailing skills. One conquistador wrote, "Their vessels are as seaworthy as any we have seen in Europe." Rome had no naval tradition left by the 1400s, had to learn ocean navigation from scratch, from Muslims and Asians who had already mastered it. Military technology and warfare equals round 4. Military power. Here's where Europe claims superiority. Military technology. Rome in the 1400s had primitive firearms, early gunpowder weapons, no unified military force. The Philippines. Here's what gets erased from history. Filipinos had access to superior military technology. Filipinos had been acquiring firearms from Arab and Asian traders for centuries. They had cannons. They had organized military forces. They had trained warriors who understood naval warfare, which is harder than land warfare. When the Spanish arrived in 1521, they expected an easy conquest. They had guns. They had armor. But they faced organized resistance. The Raja of Cebu had a sophisticated military. Warriors trained in seafaring combat. Fortified positions. Magellan actually died in battle against Filipino forces, not from natural causes, not from disease, from a direct military confrontation with warriors led by Lapu-Lapu, a Filipino fighter who defeated European guns with strategy and speed. It took the Spanish over 40 years to fully conquer the Philippines, longer than most regions they encountered. Why? Because Philippines had significant military capability. Rome was fragmented and militarily weak by the 1400s, had no organized standing army, had no naval military tradition. Medicine and science. Round 5. Medical knowledge and scientific understanding. Rome in the 1400s had essentially no advanced medicine. European medicine was based on medieval superstition, bleeding patients, leeches, prayers. The medical knowledge Rome had accumulated was lost. The Philippines had sophisticated medical practices. Archaeological and historical evidence shows Filipinos had advanced herbal medicine using local plants. They had surgical techniques for treating wounds. They had understanding of diseases and treatments. They had midwifery practices that were actually effective. They had sanitation practices that prevented disease. Spanish friars documented encountering Filipino healers, albulario, with extensive medical knowledge. They prescribed specific herbs for specific ailments. They performed surgery. They had success rates that rivaled European doctors, actually better than European doctors. Chinese trade records mention buying medicinal plants and learning medical techniques from Filipino traders. The Arab world had similar respect for Filipino medical knowledge. Rome had lost its medical tradition. European medicine was centuries behind. Culture and education. Round 6. Culture, learning, and education. Rome in the 1400s had limited literacy. Most Europeans couldn't read or write. Education was available only to the clergy and nobility. The Philippines? A different story entirely. Butuan, in particular, was known as a center of learning. Filipinos had a written language, Baybayin script. They documented knowledge. They preserved manuscripts. They had a culture that valued learning. Spanish friars were shocked to discover that many Filipinos could read and write in their own script. Some Filipinos were literate in multiple languages, their native language, Arabic, Chinese. Multilingual societies were advanced. Women, as we covered in our previous video, participated in intellectual and cultural life. Female Babaylan were healers and philosophers and teachers. Rome had literacy concentrated among elites, had no written standard language for common people, had religious monopoly on knowledge. Point: Philippines. The verdict. So who was really more advanced? Ancient Rome or ancient Philippines? Here's the honest answer. They were advanced in different ways. Rome had engineering achievements, aqueducts, roads, large-scale architecture, but by the 1400s, Rome had lost those achievements. That knowledge was gone. The Philippines, advanced in trade, navigation, medicine, governance, maritime technology, and learning. These are the skills of a living, thriving civilization, not a civilization clinging to past glory. If we're comparing them head-to-head in the 1400s, when Europeans actually encountered the Philippines, Philippines was arguably more advanced in almost every practical way. But here's why you don't learn this in school. Because admitting that non-European civilizations were advanced threatens a specific narrative. A narrative that says Europe was always superior, that colonization was justified because colonizers were more civilized. It's a lie, and the evidence proves it. The Philippines wasn't conquered because it was primitive. It was conquered because it didn't have guns in the exact same way Europeans had guns. That's not about civilization. That's about military technology at one specific moment in history. If you found this video as mind-blowing as I did, drop a like right now. Subscribe to Echoes of the Empires and turn on notifications so you never miss a video that challenges the history you were taught. Comment below. Did this change how you think about ancient history? Which comparison shocked you most? Let me know. I read every comment. And if you want to dive deeper into ancient Philippines, check out our other videos on the Four Kingdoms, female leaders, and more hidden histories. The truth is out there, and it's far more incredible than anything your textbooks told you. Thanks for watching Echoes of the Empires. See you in the next one.